Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to our channel, Pakistan Zindabad, the next world superpower. This is episode 24, and today we are diving deep into a fascinating and really ambitious strategic concept from the book The Nuclear Umbrella, written by Mr. Zahir Ahmed Mir. Now, I want you to imagine something for a moment. Picture a single, unified naval force with the power to secure the most important arteries of global trade. Not a navy belonging to one single superpower, but a massive coalition, united by shared geography and common interests. That's the core idea we're exploring today, a detailed blueprint for a unified command designed to protect the world's most critical maritime corridors. It's a huge idea, so let's get right into it.
To really wrap our heads around the scale of what we're talking about, let's start with just one number, 70%. That's it. But that number, 70%, quietly shapes almost every single aspect of our modern world. Why? Because that's the percentage of all global trade that travels by sea. I mean, just look around you right now. The device you're watching this on, the clothes you're wearing, the food in your kitchen, chances are most of it is spent time on a container ship, journeying across an ocean to get to you. The high seas are without a doubt the true engine of the global economy.
Okay, so if the seas are the engine, what's the fuel? Well, for that, let's look at another number. And this one is even more staggering, 90%. A full 90% of the Muslim world's oil exports, the very energy that powers that global engine, flows through those exact same sea lanes. Now think about that. This isn't just some regional statistic. It is an absolutely critical lifeline for industrial nations, for developing economies, for pretty much everyone across the entire globe. It's a constant river of energy that our collective stability really depends on.
So you see, we're not just talking about simple shipping routes here. As the source material argues so powerfully, these are absolute lifelines. For a huge number of nations, the line between economic prosperity and, frankly, national security isn't drawn on some map on land, it's drawn on the waves of the high seas. When you really think about it, whoever controls those waves has a hand on the pulse of the entire world. It's that fundamental.
Now, when you start pulling all these threads together, a really stark picture of dependence begins to emerge. It's almost scary, actually. First, you've got that massive 70% flow of all global trade. Then you layer on top of that the critical 90% river of energy exports. And now let's add a third crucial layer. 65% of all food imports are squeezed through just a handful of very narrow naval choke points. This concentration, this funneling effect, creates an astonishingly fragile system. It's an incredible point of vulnerability for everyone. And this is where the argument in the book gets really interesting. This immense global dependence on these sea lands leads us to a pretty surprising geographical reality. The author, Mr. Mir, posits that when you look at them collectively, Muslim-majority countries hold a strategic position of almost unmatched power. And not through military might, not in the traditional sense, but through the simple, powerful, and unchangeable fact of where their coastlines happen to be. It's a power that's literally written on the map.
You can almost trace this incredible arc of influence with your finger across a globe. It's a continuous, unbroken chain. It starts on the shores of North Africa, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. It sweeps down through the Arabian Peninsula, which stands guard over both the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. Then it continues across the incredibly strategic coast of Pakistan in South Asia, and it stretches all the way to the vital archipelagos of Indonesia and Malaysia in the east. What you have is a continuous bridge of land and sea that physically connects the economic powerhouses of the east with the markets of the west. It's truly unique.
This quote from the author really just crystallizes the whole idea perfectly. The Muslim world is the bridge between East and West, the guardian of energy routes and the custodian of global commercial arteries. It's not just about having a long coastline, you see. It's about that coastline serving as a gatekeeper, as a guardian. The book frames this unique geography, not just as an advantage, but as a profound responsibility, to act as the custodian for the very arteries of global commerce and energy that the entire world depends on for its survival.
But here's the crucial pivot in the author's argument. This is the big but. This incredible geographic strength, this immense potential for influence and stewardship, well, according to the source, it is fundamentally undermined by a critical structural flaw. A flaw so significant that it leaves this massive advantage almost completely unrealized. It's a classic case of potential versus reality.
The problem is this stark, jarring contrast between what could be and what is. On one side of the ledger, you have this immense geographic strength. You are the guardian of global arteries. You control the strategic coastlines. But on the other side, the author describes a state of naval weakness. This isn't about a lack of ships or sailors necessarily, it's about fragmentation. Dozens of independent, uncoordinated navies, each with their own priorities, their own doctrines, and little to no strategic integration. And this fragmentation turns those powerful strategic coastlines into exposed and deeply vulnerable choke points.
And these are the choke points we're talking about. I mean, each one of these is a household name in global logistics, finance, and security. You have the Suez Canal, the shortcut between Europe and Asia, the Bab el-Mandeb, of course, the Strait of Hormuz, often called the world's oil tap, the Malacca Strait, critical for East Asian trade, the Turkish Straits, and the Gulf of Aden. These aren't just dots on a map, they are the fragile bottlenecks through which a huge portion of the world's economic lifeblood must pass. And the source argues this profound lack of coordinated defense puts everything and everyone at risk.
So what's the inevitable result of this situation? The author contends that this lack of coordination creates a power vacuum. And as we know, vacuums in geopolitics are rarely empty for long. They always get filled. In this case, that space is inevitably filled by external naval powers who step in to secure their own interests. And what does that mean? It means they are the ones monitoring, patrolling, and sometimes even contesting control over these vital trade routes, often right on the geographic doorstep of the coastal nations themselves.
This brings us, finally, to the very core of the book's proposal. A bold, and let's be honest, incredibly ambitious solution to this deep strategic weakness. To counter the fragmentation, to fix this flaw, the author lays out a detailed blueprint for something called a unified naval command. The goal, to create a single, integrated structure designed to forge one cohesive, powerful force from many individual navies.
The entire blueprint really rests on 4 clear logical pillars, and this vision, it goes way beyond a simple military alliance. First, it calls for one integrated naval fleet, operating under one single maritime command. Think about that, one chain of command. Second, this unified force would be guided by one shared security doctrine, specifically for protecting those critical choke points we just talked about, so everyone's on the same page. And finally, all of this would culminate in one global naval protection force with a singular, unified mission.
So, let's break that down. What does unified command actually mean in this context? The book is very clear about this. It defines it as a structure where national navies don't just disappear or get absorbed into some giant blob. No, they'd retain their national identity, their ships, their heritage. But they would agree to operate under one strategic umbrella, coordinating their patrols, sharing intelligence, and planning their actions for the joint protection of their shared maritime interests. It's about unity of effort, not unity of identity.
All right, so we have the problem, the fragmentation, and we have the proposed solution, the 4 pillars of a unified command. So what is the ultimate end goal of this incredibly ambitious blueprint? If this unified command were to actually be implemented, what would it achieve on the world stage? Well, the author presents a very clear, very powerful vision for the outcome.
The author actually gives this grand vision a specific name, the Muslim Maritime Shield. Now that's a really potent metaphor, isn't it? A shield. It immediately suggests a posture that is fundamentally defensive. The goal presented here isn't aggression. It's not about projecting power for the sake of it. Instead, the vision is about creating collective security. It's about the durable, long-term protection of those vital economic lifelines, not just for the member nations, but for the benefit of everyone who uses them.
And what, exactly, would this theoretical shield protect? Well, according to the source, its mandate would need to be totally comprehensive. It's a vision of complete end-to-end maritime security. It would aim to secure not just those global trade routes and critical energy shipments we've been talking about, but also sacred pilgrimage sea lanes, which is a unique and vital consideration. And of course, it would protect the physical infrastructure that makes it all possible, the bustling commercial ports and the naval bases that would support the fleet itself.
And so, all of this leaves us with the central, massive question posed by this entire blueprint. What does it really take to turn a geographic advantage, something you can see on a map, into real, unified strategic power on the water? It's one thing to possess this incredible potential on paper. It is a whole other thing entirely to forge the trust, the political will, and the deep coordination required to actually translate that potential into reality. This book offers one possible path, one blueprint. But the question of what it truly takes, well, that remains one of the great strategic challenges of.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a really ambitious strategic vision, one laid out in Zahir Ahmed Mir's book, The Nuclear Umbrella. Now, don't let the title fool you. We're not talking about atomic weapons here. We're talking about a completely different kind of shield, a massive, unified naval alliance meant to protect the maritime interests of Muslim nations all across the globe.
So let's just jump right in with the core question the book really poses. I mean, just think about it. What would a NATO of the sea,
but for the Muslim world, actually look like? Imagine an alliance stretching all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific, built on this idea of collective security at sea. That's the huge, powerful idea we're going to unpack today. We're going to look at exactly how a monumental concept like this would even be put together.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the core concept, the vision behind the alliance. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty and map out its 5 different operational commands. After that, we'll look at the actual hardware, the ships and assets that make up the so-called Brotherhood fleet. From there, we'll explore the high-tech digital network that's supposed to connect them all. And finally, we'll step back and consider the huge geopolitical questions a vision like this brings up.
Okay, first things first. Let's get to the very foundation of this entire proposal. What's the big idea here? Well, it all kicks off with something called the Unified Naval Command.
So the book calls it the Unified Naval Command, or UNC for short. And you know, the most important word right there is permanent. This isn't some temporary task force you spin up for a crisis. The vision is for a standing, fully integrated military alliance, a lot like NATO. And its 2 main jobs are crystal clear. Number 1, collective security. An attack on one is an attack on all. And number 2, protecting those vital sea lanes that are, let's be honest, the economic lifeblood for all of these nations.
So, you might be asking, how on earth would you manage an organization this huge? Well, the proposal calls for a dual command structure. You'd have 2 main headquarters, one in Karachi, Pakistan, and the other over in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And the strategy behind these locations is pretty fascinating. Karachi gives you this perfect gateway to the Arabian Sea and the supercritical Indo-Pacific region. Jeddah, on the other hand, is right at the heart of the Red Sea, one of the world's most important maritime choke points. So this isn't random. It's a very deliberate plan to anchor the whole alliance at 2 of the most pivotal points in its entire operational area.
Okay, so you've got the big picture command. But how do you actually patrol millions and millions of square miles of ocean? Well, the answer seems to be to divide and conquer. The book breaks down this enormous responsibility into 5 distinct regional commands. First up is Command North. This zone covers the Mediterranean, and it would be led by the region's major naval powers, Egypt, Algeria, and Turkey. Their main job? Securing the Suez Canal. I mean, that waterway is so critical that any little disruption sends shockwaves through the entire global economy. They'd also be in charge of the Turkish Straits and patrolling the coasts of North Africa and the Levant. Next, let's swing over to Command West, which looks out into the vast Atlantic. This command, led by Morocco, Mauritania, and Senegal, is all about protecting that huge West African coastline. This area is absolutely essential for trade routes, connecting Africa, Europe, and the Americas, and it's been a known hotspot for piracy and illegal trafficking. So this command would basically act as the alliance's western shield.
Then you've got Command Central, and honestly, this might be one of the most critical zones of them all. Led by Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Sudan, its laser focuses the Red Sea. This narrow stretch of water contains the Bab al-Mandab Strait, a choke point that's just a few miles wide but sees a massive portion of global trade pass through it. This command would also have the very unique job of securing the sea routes for the millions of pilgrims who travel to Mecca and Medina every year.
Moving east, we find Command East, which is centered on the Arabian Sea and the Persian Gulf. This one's led by a coalition of Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Oman, and its number 1 priority is, you guessed it, securing the Strait of Hormuz, the world's single most important oil choke point, period. This command would also be protecting huge strategic ports like Gwadar in Pakistan and Jabal Ali in the UAE, not to mention the shipping lanes for Qatar's enormous natural gas exports. The economic stakes in this zone are just immense.
And finally, we have Commando Indo-Pacific, the easternmost anchor of this entire alliance. Led by the powerful maritime nations of Malaysia and Indonesia, this command would oversee the Strait of Malacca, which is, just the busiest shipping lane on the entire planet. Its role is to keep things stable in this incredibly crowded and geopolitically tense region, which includes key routes right through the South China Sea.
Now, the really clever part here is how these 5 separate commands are designed to act as one. It's not just 5 different navies doing their own thing in 5 different places. No, they'd be tied together by a common framework. They'd share intelligence in real time, they would coordinate their patrol routes so there are absolutely no gaps. They'd form combined task forces for specific missions. And this is crucial, they would all operate under a single unified naval doctrine. That means a ship from Indonesia could work seamlessly with a ship from Morocco. And to top it all off, shared satellite surveillance would give every single one of them the same unified view of the seas.
So, we've got the structure and the command zones. But what about the hardware? I mean, what ships, submarines, and drones would actually make up this naval force? Well, the book gives this physical force a pretty powerful name, the Brotherhood Fleet.
And this fleet wouldn't be built from scratch. The idea is way smarter than that. It would be a permanent, multinational force that draws on the unique strengths of each member nation. So for instance, the proposal lays out how Pakistan would provide its expertise in frigates and submarines. Turkey would bring its advanced corvettes and, this is a big one, its cutting-edge naval drones. Saudi Arabia and Qatar would contribute their modern, very high-tech fleets. Egypt and Algeria add even more submarine capabilities, which are just vital for deterrence. Indonesia and Malaysia supply their large patrol fleets, perfect for their region, while the UAE chips in with its advanced, high-speed missile boats. It's all about leveraging specialized national strengths to create a really balanced and powerful whole.
So what would this fleet actually do all day? Well, its missions would be incredibly diverse. On the high-end warfare side of things, you've got anti-submarine patrols. For daily security, you have anti-piracy operations and escorting commercial ships through dangerous waters, but it's not all about combat. The fleet would also be tasked with humanitarian operations, like disaster relief. And strategically, a couple of missions really stand out. Blockade prevention, to make sure no member nation can be economically choked off, and rapid deployment, the ability to get forces to any crisis point fast across its entire vast area of operations.
You know, a fleet this large and this spread out is only as good as its communication. So how do you connect a force that literally stretches across 3 continents? Well, the book proposes a shared digital shield, what is basically a single nervous system for the entire alliance.
The book calls this the Maritime Early Warning System, and it's pretty straightforward. It works in 3 steps. First, you've got data collection. This means sucking in information from every possible source: coastal radars, ship-based radars, surveillance drones, satellites, even underwater sensors. Think of it as thousands of eyes and ears. Second, integration. All of that raw data gets fed into a central joint communication grid. This is the brain that sorts through it all. And third, and this is the real magic, dissemination. The system doesn't just collect data, it instantly shares actionable intelligence about threats across the entire alliance.
And this is where the true power of a system like this becomes crystal clear. Just imagine a single radar operator in one port, anywhere from Morocco to Malaysia, spots something suspicious. The entire alliance knows, instantly, not in hours, not in minutes, but in seconds. There's no delay, no bureaucratic chain of command for the warning to climb. A threat that's identified by one becomes the immediate knowledge of all. And that capability for instantaneous, shared awareness is what could really transform a collection of navies into a truly unified fighting force. It's a potential game changer.
So, we've looked at the command structure, we've looked at the fleet, and we've looked at the digital network that ties it all together. Which brings us to our final and, I think, most important section. What would all of this actually mean on the world stage?
You know, the source material makes a really bold claim. It says this would be the most expansive maritime alliance in the world. And honestly, when you just look at the map from the Atlantic through the Med, the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, all the way to the Indo-Pacific, it's pretty hard to argue with the sheer geographic scale of this vision. It is, without a doubt, global in scope.
And so this leads us to the final, really thought-provoking question. If a vision like this actually became a reality, how would it reshape our world? How would an alliance that controls nearly every major maritime choke point outside of the Americas affect global trade? And how would the arrival of such a massive new naval power shift the global balance of security? The proposal in the nuclear umbrella doesn't just suggest a new fleet. It suggests an entirely new geopolitical reality.
All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're diving into a really powerful and, frankly, ambitious idea from Zahir Ahmed Mir's book, The Nuclear Umbrella. Now, imagine this for a second. What if the entire Muslim world, with all its vast coastlines and absolutely critical sea lanes, decided to unite its naval power? Not just as allies, but as a single, cohesive, unified force. It's a massive strategic vision, and we're going to break down exactly what the author proposes, how he thinks it would work, and what it could mean. So let's dive in.
So, at the very heart of the book is this idea of a fundamental transformation, and this slide really lays out the author's before and after vision perfectly. On the left, you've got the from column, which is basically the reality right now. You have dozens of individual nations, each with its own navy, each pretty much focused on its own little slice of the coast. The author argues this leads to strategic fragmentation. It's inefficient. You've got these incredibly important trade routes, basically the arteries carrying the world's oil and goods, and they're vulnerable. Defense is reactive. Now, look at the to column. This is the proposed future, and it's a total paradigm shift. The author imagines all these isolated navies syncing up, becoming one global fleet. He sees these scattered states transforming into a genuine maritime superpower. And those vulnerable routes, they become protected, resilient lifelines. It's a really bold concept, right? Moving from a position of just defending your own backyard to one of strategic influence across the world's oceans.
Okay, so you've got this giant unified fleet. Now what? What's its purpose? What's its guiding principle? This is where the idea gets really interesting. The author argues that for a project this massive to actually work, it can't just be another military alliance held together by shifting political interests. No, it needs a unifying mission, a purpose. And he proposes one that's framed as both a strategic necessity and a sacred duty. The mission is all about protecting the holiest sites and the critical maritime routes that connect the entire Muslim world. This gives the fleet a reason to exist that theoretically transcends the day-to-day squabbles of national politics. Let's take a closer look at the core of this doctrine.
And the cornerstone of that whole mission is this concept right here, the Sacred Maritime Protection Zone. Now, according to the book, this is not some temporary task force that you spin up when there's a crisis. Not at all. It's envisioned as a permanent, top-tier defense priority for the entire unified command. And its purpose is kind of brilliant because it's twofold. First, and this is the sacred part, it's about securing the sea lanes that are essential for religious pilgrimages, like the Hajj. But second, and just as important, it's about protecting the economic arteries. We're talking tanker routes, shipping lanes, that basically fuel the region's economies. So you see what's happening? It merges a faith-based imperative with some really hard-nosed geopolitical strategy. That combination creates a powerful and unifying reason for this fleet to act.
So, what would this protection zone actually do on a day-to-day basis? Well, this slide breaks it down perfectly. The objectives laid out in the book are crystal clear, very specific. Number 1, ensure the sea routes for the annual Hajj pilgrimage are safe, and that's a massive logistical and security challenge every single year. Number 2, guarantee that the Red Sea, one of the most critical maritime choke points on the entire planet, remains open and secure for all traffic. Number 3, create a kind of maritime shield to protect the holy cities of Mecca and Medina from any potential threats that might come from the sea. And finally, number 4, make sure that the year-round Umrah pilgrimage traffic can also proceed without any interruption. You see, it's a very specific, tangible, and focused mandate. It's designed to serve both spiritual and strategic goals at the same time. All right, so the theory sounds solid, right? But how would this unified fleet actually respond when things get real, in a crisis? Well, to answer that, the author lays out 5 distinct hypothetical scenarios to really put the concept to the test. And this is where the strategic vision really comes to life. These aren't just random examples he pulled out of a hat. No, they're specifically chosen to show how a single, coordinated force could react to all sorts of different challenges: economic, humanitarian, military, across a huge geographical area. So let's jump into the first scenario and see how this all plays out. Okay, scenario 1, a blockade in the Red Sea, a key global artery suddenly choked off. Supply chains worldwide are thrown into chaos. So what does the unified fleet do? According to the book, its response is decisive. The fleet wouldn't just be there to escort its own ships. No, it would step up and assume the role of a regional security guarantor. Its mission would be to actively open and secure safe corridors, not just for its own members, but for all international traffic. And that is a huge step. It's a move from simple self-defense to actively enforcing the principle of freedom of navigation for the entire world in one of its most vital waterways. Scenario 2 takes us to another one of the world's most critical choke points, the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, think about it. A huge chunk of the world's oil supply passes through this incredibly narrow channel every single day. Any crisis here sends immediate shockwaves through the entire global economy. So in this situation, the author argues the unified Navy's main job would be to ensure that the oil keeps flowing. It would act as a powerful stabilizing force, tasked with preventing a local or regional dispute from spiraling into a full-blown global energy crisis. It's about being the steadied hand in a very volatile situation. Now, the third scenario is a dramatic shift in focus. It moves away from economics and into humanitarian intervention. The scenario is a maritime siege on Gaza. In this case, the book imagines the unified fleet using its immense power, not for a conventional battle, but to enforce a humanitarian naval corridor. The goal here would be to carve out a protected, internationally recognized safe zone on the sea. Why? To make sure that aid, food, and essential medical supplies could safely reach the civilian population. This is meant to show a totally different dimension of naval power, projecting stability for humanitarian reasons. Next up, a problem that has plagued international shipping for years: piracy off the coast of East Africa. The book suggests this would be a clear law and order mission for the unified fleet. The argument is pretty compelling. Instead of relying on this patchwork of different international task forces, all with different rules of engagement, you'd have this single, powerful, regionally focused fleet. It would have the clear mandate and, frankly, the overwhelming muscle to go in and decisively crush these pirate networks once and for all, bringing long-term security back to some of the world's most important shipping lanes. And for the final scenario, the vision expands thousands of miles east, right into the bustling Indo-Pacific. Imagine regional instability threatening the Strait of Malacca, another absolutely vital global artery. Here, the book proposes a more flexible approach, a sort of sub-command. It suggests a joint force, led by the major regional navies, we're talking Malaysia, Indonesia, and Pakistan, would be specifically tasked with stabilizing those key shipping lanes. And what this shows is that the author's vision isn't just about one giant monolithic force. It's designed to be adaptable, with regional commands tailored to specific regional challenges. It's a much more nuanced approach.
So after walking us through these 5 very different scenarios, the author ties it all together to paint this picture of the ultimate outcome. And it's really not just about naval tactics or winning battles at sea. The goal described in the book is to fundamentally reshape the geopolitical standing of the entire Muslim world. It's about moving from being actors within a system defined by other powers to becoming shapers of that system. It's about creating a true, tangible shield, one that's projected across the world's oceans. And this one quote from the source material just perfectly captures the essence of the entire proposal. The oceans become the shield of the Ummah. Think about that for a moment. The author is using the ocean not as a barrier, not as a frontier that you have to passively defend, but as an active instrument of protection. The idea is that this unified naval power would project security, stability, and sovereignty outwards from the collective, creating a shield that safeguards both faith and future prosperity. It's a really powerful image. And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating and complex question to think about. I mean, the book lays out a clear and powerful vision from one author's perspective. But if we step back for a second, what would the real-world implications be? If a unified naval command like this were to ever actually exist, how might it truly reshape global maritime strategy? How would it force other world powers to recalculate their existing alliances? And how would it fundamentally alter the balance of power on the high seas? It's a